Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Ccap Candidate Data Form National Webinar. I'm Jovita Tolbert, and I'll be running the behind-the-scenes technology for today's webinar. Just a few quick technical notes before we get started. This webinar will be recorded and made available to all of you through a follow-up email and via the partnership website within the next few days. Please note that you will be muted for this presentation, but you should be able to hear us from your computer speakers. If you lose audio at any time during the presentation, please click the Communicate tab in the upper left-hand corner of your screen and select Audio Broadcast to reboot your audio. If you continue to have audio issues, you can also call into the session or webinar using the teleconference number located at the bottom of your confirmation email. If you have questions during the event, please provide them to us through the chat box. Please also be sure to select all panelists from the drop-down menu before sending your question through chat. And before we get started, it is my pleasure to introduce to everyone our new Ccap administrator, Mitsy Hubbard. Mitsy, please say a few words.
Thank you, Jovita. My name is Mitsy Hubbard. I am so happy to be here today with you. I look forward to the next 8 months in observance of your progress through the Ccap program and to offer any assistance or to answer any questions you may have along the way. Starting today, as we take this journey together and to help guide you through the Ccap process, Jim and I have scheduled a series of 3 Ccap webinars, this being the first webinar, Ccap Candidate Data Form Guidance. Please let me know if you have any questions or concerns through the Ccap process. We will be here for you every step of the way. When it is time for your Ccap exam, forward all your questions to Jim, as he will assist you in the preparation for the exam. On that note, Jim, I hand this webinar to you, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Mitsy. We are so glad that you are part of the team at the partnership. And though I've retired from the position of Ccap administrator, it is a delight to be working with you in that role. I will be continuing to assist the program as the Ccap exam consultant. And as Mitsy mentioned, will be your contact person for questions concerning the exam and during the course of the administering of the exam. And I will be the consultant that works with the Commission Ccap exam committee. But all other matters about Ccap will be, Mitsy will be the person who will be shepherding that process. And today we're taking a look at the Ccap first step, which is the candidate data form. And we're going to talk a bit through the details of the candidate data form. But I want to give some preliminary reflections in advance of that. I should note that I will be doing these webinars just in this first year to assist Mitsy in the progress. And so I will be doing each of the 3 that we'll be talking about. Certification is based on a point system, and I think those of you who have already enrolled know that it's a maximum of 3 years from the date of enrollment as a candidate to accumulate the points that you need to finally become determined to be a certified community action professional. Those points are the objective measures of your experience, and thus the candidate data form is the opportunity to chronicle your experience in community action. Then in November, we'll be looking at the second objective measure, which is the executive skills portfolio, which is your ability to demonstrate your skill in doing the work of community action, making the vision and values of community action real in your work setting. And whenever you've completed the candidate data form and ESP process sufficient to qualify you to take the examination, and you'll be reminded again about what that means. Then you have the opportunity to demonstrate your knowledge about community action, which is in the Ccap exam, which happens in June, usually each year. And there will be a webinar on the exam in March, and we will remind you of those dates again before this webinar is completed. The CDF is based on an honor system. You sign and date the form. You're not asked to prove anything that you've put down on your data form, but because you signed your code of ethics, that manifests your commitment to a level of professionalism that is appropriate for someone submitting such a form for the purpose of being assessed for your qualifications to be determined as a Ccap. It's very important that you only use the current data form, the CDF, that you'll find in the partnership website. And I'm going to show a little later a screenshot of where that's located on the partnership website. That candidate data form is refreshed frequently. Not every year. There have been some minor adjustments since last year, since the 2019-2020 year. But look for a CDF revision August 2020. That's the one that is currently posted on the partnership website. A lot of Ccaps like to be helpful and give people who are potential candidates an old candidate data form to get them started. Say thank you very much, but I'll get a fresh one. Now, the next closing date, or the next time to receive the candidate data form is received at the partnership office. We'll talk about how that's done by email a little bit later when we talk about the details of it, after we talk through the structure of it. That closing date is Wednesday, January 20th, 2021. What that means is that's the last day you can have a candidate data form examined for potential considerations for qualification to take the exam in 2021. Any candidate data form submitted after that would only be considered that you're looking to qualify to complete the process in the following year, 2022. So if you really want to get started and get this on record and have the option for 2021, make sure that candidate data form is submitted by January 20th. Again, we'll get in a little bit more detail about those practical matters in a few moments. The candidate data form receives a provisional score as it arrives. That score is not final until the executive skills portfolio arrives and it is scored. There's lots of technical reasons for that have to do with the way in which points are calculated, and it's really more weeds than you want to get to in this webinar. But you'll also see, as we look at the candidate data form, you can figure out pretty much for yourself very closely what that score is likely to be, because the form tells you the value for each section where you make an entry. Accordingly, then, a CDF score is never communicated from the partnership office to the Ccap program separately from an ESP score, because that score is provisional, and the ESP comes in that requires an audit of the candidate data form score, and then it becomes official. But you can get, as I mentioned, you can pretty much estimate for yourself what that score will be. Also, as we look through the candidate data form entry sections, data entry sections, know that all through it, no partial points are given in any category. It's only given in whole integers. There's no 1.5 or 1.76, nothing like that, including the years of employment. So if you're employed 1 year and 4 months, that's 1 year. If you're employed 1 year and 10 months, that's still 1 year. There's no partial points given in the candidate data form. Now, while it's a staff and trained Ccap volunteers, and currently Mitsy is in the process of training new volunteers to score the CDF on first read, all decisions about ambiguous entries are made by the chair of the commission. That's one of those reasons that initial score is provisional. Sometimes it's not clear whether something qualifies. Again, that determination about an ambiguous score is made by the chair of the commission. It's almost never an issue except when a candidate is this close to qualifying. Then we want to make sure that that determination is extremely fair and excruciatingly careful. That's why the score is provisional. To advance to the examination, a candidate needs a total score of 700 points, combining the score for the CDF and the ESP. Additionally, the CDF that you submit must receive a score of 300 points. And to race ahead into next month's webinar, the same is true of the executive skills portfolio. It must have a minimum of 300 points. So that if either the candidate data form or the executive skills portfolio scores 400 points, anything over that is superfluous because the other one has to score 300 and the total has to be 700. You've already made it. Okay? Now let's take a look in some details of the candidate data form. About items about submission, and I'm going to look into some preliminary notes. And then after I do that, I'm going to take a look in the chat window to see if you have any questions before we dig in to each section of the candidate data form. A candidate may submit additional entries to a previously submitted candidate data form at any time. Or you might want to submit, if you don't get enough points in your first year, ask for new considerations in the following year. You do not have to complete a new CDF. You just submit an addendum page. And I'll give you an example of what one looks like a little bit later. You don't have to submit a whole new candidate data form. When you are ready to submit your candidate data form and any addendum pages that may be necessary because the form wasn't long enough for you to admit everything, scan the completed candidate data form and any addendum pages into one document and submit it to Mitsy at the CommunityActionPartnership.com. Again, we're going to get back to some specific, really careful details about that process at the end of this webinar. We'll get into more minute details. It is no longer, for those of you who might have done candidate data forms before, no longer to submit copies of any publications or manuals that you've authored, that used to be suggested and required in certain sections of the candidate data form. For those of you who are new, don't even get bothered that I said that. For those of you who've done the candidate data form before, you don't have to do that anymore. For those of you who are new, that doesn't make any sense anyway. Okay. Now let's look and get back to the candidate data form. And we're going to look at its sections. Let me ask the first one is on employment. The candidate form is the first of your 3 assessments that's used to determine whether you're going to be recognized by the Certification Commission as a community action professional. Now, it's a far-reaching and very comprehensive method for you as a candidate to gain recognition by your professional peers in a variety of experiences. Now, for example, these experiences are going to show up now as we look through the form in great detail as recognition about your status in employment, which we're going to look in right now at this part of it. That's serving in positions that are positions of the level of executive management in your agency or association or related employment settings. We'll look then a little later at how you chronicle your professional training and preparation and development. We'll look again, as we look through the candidate data form, of how you chronicle the ways that you have engaged in the community outside your agency, in the larger work of espousing the vision and values of community action in the community, and all the various ways in which you have contribute to the forward movement of the engagement of all persons in the life of our communities. But we're going to start right now with just the first section, which is the shortest section of the candidate data form on your years of experience as a management executive. Now, you note as you look through this, look on this page, that you'll see that as there is indicated here, you're going to get a certain number of points per each entry. So, for example, here in employment, for your number of years as a management or executive staff in a community action agency or in an association, it's up to 15 points per year. But once you've reached a total of 150 points, that is, once you've been employed for 10 years or more, you can't gain any more points. You've maxed out that category. That is true of every single category on the candidate data form, as you'll see as we move forward. Now, you'll ask, the number of years as a management or executive staff, what does that mean? Well, the Commission has operationalized that, has asked for you to demonstrate that it is a management executive staff if you can say yes, if you can mark an X on this fillable PDF form to 3 of any of those 5 descriptions of a position that you see underneath that entry, that qualifies. For example, it includes the authority beyond the mere responsibility to carry out others' orders and has discretion. But maybe you don't supervise at least one other employee. Nope, can't check that one off. But I do report directly to this board. Check that one off. I do administer a budget. Check that one off. Okay, I've already checked off 3. That's enough. Just 3 out of 5. You can check that off. And that has to be checked for every position that you indicate under that category. Now, on this screenshot, you only see 1 page. This same thing is repeated 3 times. That is, you might have 3 different employment, different positions in your agency. Before we look into the next section of the candidate data form, I'm going to see what kinds of issues have been raised in our chat box, okay? So bear with. Someone asked, how would this add up for staff in the state office? Exactly the same way. The state office, like if you are in a state CSBG office or its Office of Economic Opportunity, or however the state office is identified, where it has the responsibility for recognition of those who are those eligible entities within the state. If you have served in that position, it's the same categories that you need to check off. I don't see any other questions. All right. Now, this is the question that was raised by one of our participants does point to the fact that this sounds kind of cumbersome. How could a single form serve to catalog the experience of community action leaders when there's such a wide variety of background and work experience? Well, it certainly is a challenge to cover all the bases. But think of this. Much of community action's power is in its ability to respond quickly, strategically, and creatively to the ever-changing and evolving needs of the low-income community as they seek full inclusion in the life of the American dream, right? And that means the best leaders in community action are both nimble and strategic-minded at the same time. But there are many ways community action leaders get to their goals of community service and advocacy that are commonly shared as well. So, there's a special value in having a candidate take some time to think about how their experiences are like those of other leaders in community action. Is it worth the effort to find that commonality, to let your peers see how you do the work and advance the mission of community? It's best to work with a Ccap mentor as you review the sections of the CDF we're looking now and further. And think of it this way. The process of completing the CDF should not be viewed as a hurdle, rather an opportunity reflectively, purposefully, and intentionally to take stock of experience that formed your professional identity and that keeps you focused and being a leader in this field of community action that once you get it into you, it spoils you for life. Got it? All right. That's a good spoil, by the way. 30 years here. Can't get it out of me. Okay. Let's take a look at how this points. Forgive that preaching, all right? That's part of my background, too. My apologies. Let's take a look at the next part of employment. Perhaps before you came to community action, maybe you were in a management position or a staff member in an organization other than the community action, perhaps in the nonprofit sector or the for-profit sector. Well, that's valued up to 8 points a year, all right? But that also has a maximum. I just saw a question pop up from someone. That question was, if I served as a minister in my church full-time is the same time as I am employed full-time as a program director in my agency, can I count both? No. The commission only allows one kind of full-time employment. So it's either your first category in community action or 1.2 outside of community action. I want to also emphasize that when the evaluators are looking at your candidate data form, their goal is to be inclusive, not exclusive. They want to include the experiences you list. They're not looking to separate people out. They're saying make your case, okay? So maybe you were a manager of a local small store. That's a management position, okay? Internships in community action-related organizations, the commission saw needed to be included because a number of people come into community action after having been an internship placement for a year in an agency, so that counts as well. Okay? That's all there is in the section on employment. Now we're going to take a look at the largest section of the candidate data form, which is the section on education. Whatever it is that formed your professional development as a community action leader. And that could be so many different kinds of experiences. I'm going to pause midway through this one, this section. There are 12 pieces to section 2. We'll pause midway through. But one thing to say in the beginning is that it's not acceptable to enter the same experience in 2 categories. So if there's a training experience you're going to enter in one section, you can't say, oh, let me try it in another one. Choose one that you feel fits best. And again, your evaluators are going to seek to be more inclusive than exclusive. Okay. Let's take a look at the subsections. Well, subsection 2.1 here is pretty easy. If you have an AA degree, it's worth 40 points. A BA, 100. If you have both, it's 140 points. If you have a master's, it's 150. If you're a BA and a master's, sorry, once you got 150 points as a master's, that did it, because you can see the max under the gentleman's elbow is 150 points. It's holding them up. That's the maximum of points you can get in this category. Now, let's say you got some college credits earned in management courses other than those applied to a degree you've completed. Let's say after you completed your associate's degree, and then you took a job in your community action agency that required you to have much deeper knowledge of accounting, and you went back to school to get more knowledge about principles of accounting, and you got extra credit. So that was needed for you in your position as the person who was an executive level position in your department, as responsible for finances. Or let's say you're someone who was responsible for the new center opened up in the south part of your county. And that center has a growing increase of people who are new immigrants who speak a variety of languages, and you go back to school to increase your knowledge of those languages. See, that's part of your professional development to be better at your job of management. Whatever it is, again, your evaluators are looking to be inclusive. But that's not college courses. That's the double entry question I mentioned before. If this is part of a degree program that you got, you can't add it there. But you may, now we're going to 2.3, have taken management courses that may have been just as long as a college course, but it didn't get any credit for them in college. So the commission added a separate category for that. So it might be some kind of a course that was offered by an entity in your state, a state government, federal government, or by a kind of a program that serves the needs of the nonprofit community or something that's a for-profit company, whatever it is. That course, though, take a look at the qualifications that are required. The course must be 12 hours or more. If it's less than 12 hours, don't put it here. Put it elsewhere. We'll see options as we go down into our next slide. I'm looking over to the chat box, and someone says, what if you have 2 bachelor's degrees? Do you get not if it's a double major, meaning you took the same number of you got 1 degree at the same time. If you had a bachelor's degree and went back to school and got another one, yes, you get that extra number of points, but again, it will accumulate to 140. But I got a double major when I was in college, and only the 4-year program counted, okay? All right, no more questions there. Let's go on to Section 2.4. This one is very specialized. This one, 2.4, recognizes certain programs that have been specially developed to train community action leaders in skills that are comprehensive skills needed for doing the work of community action. And here you see on that next page the list of all of them that count. And that's also shown on the last page of the candidate data form. And you'll notice that some of these programs are, there are not too many people in this webinar who remember the Executive Development Institute that was offered by the state office in Missouri. I remember going there in 1991 in Kirksville, Missouri. That Executive Development Institute didn't last past the 2000s, but there is no past in terms of maybe you got your degrees in the 1960s and 70s, like me. That degree, there's no date of that expiring. There's no date of when that institute you participated in 2.4 happened. So it's a former institute, but if you participated and it's on that list, it still counts. But many of them, as you can see, most of them are still ongoing. Now, I want you to pay special attention, any of those of you who are involved in Roma training. You only get the credits for Roma training when you've attained either certification as a trainer or an implementer, and you get only one or the other, okay? You'll see in each of those categories that there are certain requirements that you have to check whether you've completed or not, and it will be very clear on the form. There's nothing ambiguous about it, okay? Then, I'm going to pause before we go now into the smaller sections, or rather the more detailed sections of the CDF to see if there are more questions in the chat box. We do have one. Did I hear correctly that no attachments are required? Newsletter articles, even though the instructions indicate otherwise? Correct. Articles are not required. No. Now, it is possible in some time of review, if it's audited, that auditors may require that, but you'll only notice that in very unusual circumstances. You do not have to attach them. That is correct. There's no more need to attach articles. Okay? Let's look now at the next bunch of sections through the CDF. I want to look at 2.5, 6, 2.5, 2.6, and 2.7. These are about management-related seminars and trainings. Now, if you went to a management seminar that was focused on the fundamentals of community action or non-for-profit management, you can accumulate 3 points for every 6 contact hours. Basically, the commission considered 6 contact hours a full day. All right? So if you went to a full day, you got 3 points for that. So it's 10 full days, is 30 hours is the max number of points that you can accumulate for 2.5. 2.6 is for attendance at community action-related state, regional, or national association training events. Now, that means specifically this. Did you go to our virtual conference back in August? Every 1 hour session you attended counts for 1 contact hour. Did you go to your training, the last one, in your region? Did you go to Ccap, regional training? or Mid-America Conference, or Region 7, every one of those, or your state association in Missouri or in Minnesota, that counts. 1 for every contact hour, up to 30. When you've gotten to 30, you can't add more. That's the max, the number of points. 2.7 is reserved for those kinds of training that are provided by trade associations, business organizations, government organizations that are not community action related. So there might be government organizations like your state, a licensing organization. Like, for example, I'm a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida, and there are certain required courses I have to take to renew my licensure, which is coming up in March of 2021. That's an example that has nothing to do with community action. Or if a commercial seminar producer like Fred Pryor, but they teach skills of management. Well, it's required for me, for example, I have to learn new ethic principles or new government laws for mental health counselors in Florida. So they all count, etc. They may not be directly focused on community action management, but they are directly focused on your skill of doing management, some way of something that has to do with management. Okay, so that's an attempt to show you. That's an attempt to show you how 2.5, 2.6, and 2.7 are related. Again, you do your best to figure out which one fits in which category. And I'll remind you, it's not the intent of the reviewers to push them aside. The intent of the reviewers is to be inclusive. So if you find a justification to put them there, put them there. But if you put the same thing in 2 different ones, that doesn't count. You can't double dip. All right? Now, the next few that are going to show up, 2.8, 2.9, 2.10, and 2.11, are about merely attending conferences. The point of this, and you'll look at 11, 10, 11, and 12, which ones they are in a minute. You see 2.8 and 2.9 on your screen at the moment. Here's the point behind that. We don't just get our education by listening to some talking head like this, standing on his platform, pontificating about something around community action. We just get some of our education from there. We get a lot of it by talking to our associates, by networking, by listening to what is said in the workroom, saying, oh, I never understood that about this new regulation. That's really helpful to me. Networking is professional development. So it's specifically because you network at state conferences, regional conferences, and national conferences, and that is considered part of professional development. So your networking at your state association conferences counts in 2.8. At regional conferences, at 2.9. And then you'll see at 2.10 for the Community Actions Annual Conference, and you'll see at 2.11 for NCAS. By the way, that also counts for not just the annual convention, but it also counts for the Management and Leadership Training Conference. The 2.11 is our attendance at the NCAF Legislative Conference that happens each March and only in Washington, D.C. That counts for that. We have 2.12 for any other kind of conference that you think is community action related that you can add here. That might be a Head Start conference, might be a regional one, might be a weatherization conference, or that would be a Head Start leadership training and conference that someone just asked about in the chat window that I looked at. You see from the chat window that doesn't count 2.6 or 7 that attendance at the conference accounts here in 12, but any training activity that you participated, yes, those training activities do count. Let's go back to the previous screen. They do count in 2.5, yes, or 2.6, depending on the length of time of the event you're talking about. So it may well have been a management seminar that focused on the fundamentals of community action, and that may well be about Head Start, of course, or weatherization or nonprofit management, but the issue is how long was the training and what was the context, okay? I hope that answers that question. The question was, does that mean if I attend the conference, I can count in 2 places? No. Attending the whole conference counts in 2, let's say at the Head Start conference, 2.12. It's attending a seminar or a webinar at that conference that you enter separately, or a training that is provided at a conference. The fact of attending a conference on its own counts as just an attending. Let me see if that answers the question. Let me go back to the question that someone asked. Is there a difference between a conference versus a training? Yes. Must the word conference be used in order to count if it is a multiple day training? Let me ask this question, or answer this. If you go to an event, and that event means that you network with people over the course of a full day in which there's more than one training going on in that day, in the minds of the commission, that equals a conference, whether it is named one or not. The point is, if you are networking with your fellows about more than one training topic during the course of the day or two, that counts as a conference, whether it's named as one or not. I hope that helps. One of our participants in chat room says that does help. Thank you. If you have any further questions, please email them to Mitsy and to me, and we'll get back to you. Okay? Let's move on to the next section of the candidate data form, Section 3. Section 3 is about, in total, the fact that community action leaders engage in a variety of activities that reach beyond their own agency, responsibilities that advance the vision and the values of community action outside the boundaries of your own 4 walls of your office, that involve you in the community. You're a leader in the community and in your agency. So you're stretching outside of that. Community action leaders sometimes function in that way as presenters or panelists at conferences, and sometimes you publish articles, and maybe if it's a newsletter, it's online, or sometimes they function as presenters and panelists and talk to other agencies or other organizations, or sometimes you're panelists, or sometimes you publish articles, sometimes you serve as members of advisory board. Well, this whole section of the candidate data form attempts to give you an opportunity to chronicle that. So 3.1 is about instructional presentations presented to a community action agency other than your own. 3.2 is for instructional presentations to non-community action organizations. Let's say you did one for your local United Way. 3.3 is maybe you weren't quite ready to be the lead presenter, but maybe you were a panelist. That's what this is for. You were part of a panel sitting at the table. But maybe you were a panelist at that United Way event. That's 3.4. Whereas 3.3 is you're a panelist at Community Action Agency. These are pretty, I think they're pretty clear. What's the point behind it? You're extending your reach. This is showing you as a leader. This is making your candidate data form more robust. It's not just about your training and professional development. It's about your work. 3.5 is the one that is most inclusive. 3.5 is about any kind of activity where you were involved in helping in some kind of formalized way. Maybe you were on a policy review committee. Maybe you were helping another agency develop a better HR policies, and they asked you to look at them. And so you met with them on some occasion. Or maybe the state association asked you to help them improve the quality of inclusiveness in program development for the conference. And maybe they asked you to increase the advocacy activities for racial equity throughout the state association and to help change policies. There's no limit to what those activities are. But if you're involved in helping in any ways like that, that's what 3.5 is about. It can be very extensive. 3.6 is about publication of articles on community action, activities, and matters. You'll have, I didn't give the ways in which you indicate what it was. You have the opportunity to say, oh, this is a newsletter. You have boxes to check. It was a letter to the editor. It was an op-ed piece. All of those will have different numbers of points that will be available. The evaluators will see that. So that's your chance to talk about your articles you published. Remember, by the way, if you have something that you publish that's a video, that counts as well. And you indicate, I recorded a video that's part of the regular monthly podcast of that department. That counts too. 3.7 was designed specifically for persons who are presently community action staff who may have entered that staff at one point having been on the Community Action Agency's board and so found themselves in love with what Community Action did that they have found themselves to get hired by Community Action and then, of course, couldn't be on the board anymore. Or maybe they went from the board from one agency to being hired on another. That's a very unique and special one. It isn't often used, but shows the point of deep respect for persons who've come up through the ranks in community action. 3.9 is for persons who might be on the board of other human services kind of organization, like United Way, or maybe your county has a food programs or a program for, we had a unique group for our initiatives for homelessness in our county. And I served on a board for a while that helped determine distribution of state funds for mental health programs. Whatever it might be, other kinds of human services groups, all right, served on that board of directors. I'm looking to the chat box before I move to section 4. I don't see any new questions. We're going to move to the last section of number 4. And there's only 3 items to be added there. One is instructional materials. And let's say in your agency, you wrote a new manual for frontline staff that was more inclusive for sexual orientations and gender identity inclusions, which the Joint Commission on Healthcare Organizations requires of your healthcare organization. So you help them produce a new policy and procedures manual for front desk on that. Or let's say you had the responsibility for developing a new manual for your IT team or something like that, or anything where you had the responsibility of pulling that instructional material together, whether it's actual physical volume or whether it's maybe a YouTube. But any of that, it doesn't have to be a printed document anymore. So that's instructional material for your agency, or perhaps it's, if you're in a state office, for agencies in your state, or if you are in a state association for people who are responsible for your conference, anything like that. 4.2 is instructional presentations on CAA management for non-CAA related associations. If you look back what we saw in number 3, that was for within the area of. This might be if you did an instructional presentation on CAA management to your local real estate association. And why you're doing this? Because it's PR, not because you're trying to teach them about community action management, but you're talking about how you manage your organization and entity because you want them to support it. Okay? There's not too much use of 4.2, but think of it as you involved in PR. That's the most frequent use of this. 4.3, involvement in non-CAA related association management. Maybe you're on your school board or your church's board of trustees. You get 1 year per involvement, up to 5. Okay. We've looked at all the categories of the candidate data form, and there is, in addition, as I mentioned, an addendum form. So, and this is what it looks like, and I'll show you where you download that addendum form from the partnership webpage. And this addendum form serves a bunch of purposes. One, let's say that you had more entries than there was room on that fillable PDF to add. So I have more to add. So you take this fillable PDF, addendum form also on the web page, put your name and the date, and you note the categories that we just looked through. Was it years of experience? Was it education? Was it involvement in activities? Or was it involvement in publishing? Let's say it's in 4.1, and you had done a bunch of instructional manuals for different programs. So you wanted to add some besides what you had room in the form to add. So you just put down in this section where it says, at the bottom of the page, enter all additional data, just as what would have been required if you're using the candidate data form itself. Scan it and add it to your CDF form when you send it in to Mitsy. Okay? Or let's say you had to add material to your candidate data form next year because this year you quite didn't make it. Let's say you got 352 points on your candidate data form and 325 points on your executive skills profile. Oh, God, it came so close. So I want to add points on my CDF in the next year. This is how you would do it, by adding an addendum form for each category where you want to add points. I think that should be pretty clear. I look in the chat box. Oh, someone asked to add the distinction between 4.2 and the 1 in 3. The distinction, let's go back. 4.2, we're looking at that screen. Instructional presentations on community action management for non-CAA related associations. If we go back to previously, instructional to presentations to non-CAA organizations on CAA-related matters. That's on to those organizations that you are affiliated with. So that's the difference. You're affiliated with them. You're giving instructional presentations because they're working with you on that grant, for example, that you've gotten discretionary funding to do a program with the homeless, and you are in that discretionary grant also working with an organization that has doesn't have a direct affiliation with community action, but is affiliated indirectly because they're involved in a grant program that you have outside of your CSPG funding, for example. So really, it's the difference is this. In 3.2, you are engaged and involved with them. When you get to 4.2, this is more about PR. You're building awareness in the community around you. For example, let's say this to I should say realtors because I live in Florida. Think about it. Where you've got to have realtors on your side if you're going to be successful in any nonprofit. So you bring a batch of them together and you tell them this is what we do in our agency. I don't expect any of you to be involved with us, but when it comes time for we have a big funding raising event, we're going to come to you, and we may want to have one of you on that 1/3, of our board membership. That's what I say. It's more like PR involvement. It is a very subtle distinction. Most people put it in 2.5, 6, and 7. But here's your catch-all. If it's more like PR, think in terms of PR. I think that'll give you the best way of looking at it. Someone asked, great, thank you. Would you consider donors are being involved? This is one of those ambiguous questions that I make Paul Dole answer. Okay. Trust me in this regard. There will be a way to find, if you're doing that presentation and involvement, that it needs to be counted. Let me add another point. So many CDFs get submitted that go over 400 points. Once the CDFs get over 400 points, those points are unnecessary. Because once you get 300 points in executive skill portfolio, you already qualified. So I wouldn't be too anxious about it. Put it in. Put it in where you think it belongs and anticipate your evaluators are probably going to agree with you. Okay? We'll get back to you if there's a concern. All right. Let's move on to, we saw the candidate, we saw the addendum, a guide to understanding the candidate data form. Much of what you have heard on this webinar so far is published on a guide that I'm going to show you where you download if you haven't already. It doesn't provide as many of the details as I just offered you, but it's a good summary of what has been offered in this webinar. And the webinar itself will be archived. And then you get a chance to listen again to me pontificating if you want to go through it again. But the guide itself would be a kind of shorthand way of reading about what we've talked about in this webinar. But you want to then get the chance. This webinar will be archived and will be made available to you shortly after this, probably sometime before, probably by the middle of the or towards the end of the week. You'll get a chance to attend a webinar on the portfolio on November 10th and on the exam on March 9th. Now let me show you, give you some reminders. Remember that your candidacy lasts. You know what, before I give you these reminders, I'm going to go back to the chat box and see if I missed anything specifically about what was presented on the CDF so far. Someone asked, if we put something in a category where we think it fits, but when it is reviewed by you, you think it fits somewhere else, do you eliminate the points or move the points to another section? Let me say, if you think it fits, it's far more likely that it does. Reviewers are not given the option to move something. Let me get into the weeds a little bit if you want. If a candidate data form and executive skills portfolio are submitted, and the scoring process shows that a candidate has gotten within 95% of qualifying, that means if their executive skills portfolio and their candidate data form totaled anywhere between 665 and 700 points, here's what happens. That candidate data form gets audited, but not until the candidate is given about 2 weeks to add anything they want to it. And additionally, they are shown what scores have been given on the candidate data form in each category. So they have the opportunity to make adjustments. Here's what I'm saying with that. That's why I'm saying these things, if the category is not belonging, it really only comes up in the small potatoes ones that are worth a few points, all right? It's going to be very clear on the big items, like whether you have a degree or not, or whether you've, how long you've been employed, et cetera. Those sorts of items, they don't lead to the problems. So what that means is you're not going to find yourself being penalized by a few points is what I'm getting at. Because if you get close to qualifying, you're going to get an additional chance. I didn't give you all the details of how that process works, but the reason for bringing this up is this is not an instance of evaluators trying to squeeze you out. This is an instance of evaluators trying to bring you in. Make sense? Okay. But no, they don't have the right to move points. Only you do. I mean, to move categories. Okay. Some helpful reminders. Let me see if I got all the questions. All right. Candidacy lasts for 3 years. Okay. That's just a point to tell you. You've got an option to add to your CDF. And includes you have more experience, come up through the ranks. You can choose a mentor to help you along the way. If you're just getting involved and haven't chosen a mentor, I suggest you go to the partnership website and you'll find a place to locate choosing a mentor. I want to advise you, though, that we've got about another 20 mentors to be added to that list. They have gone through mentor training since the virtual convention. So you can pull up the list, and here's where you do it. If you look on the screen, see what you see in the bottom of your screen? You see a closer look, enrollment items, candidate data forms, executive skills portfolio, the written exam. On that page, which is Ccap, communityactionpartnership.com/Ccap, you'll see this screen. If on that screen you click on any of those down menus, if you click, for example, on candidate data forms, this is what you'll see. You'll see the fillable candidate data form, download CDF here, download the comprehensive guide to the CDF here, where the second arrow is, download the Addendum Form here, where the third arrow is. Let me say something about that fillable PDF. A few people make the mistake thinking once they filled it, it's saved. That's not true. When you fill a PDF, fillable PDF, you need to download it and save it filled to your computer. It will not be saved, filled on the partnership website. You'll lose it. So complete it, save it on your computer. All right. When the time comes to submit it, we'll talk about now how we do that. Submitting. Moving ahead. I just think I mentioned that earlier. Just let me review it back from the earlier slides. Remember that the candidate data form, I don't know exactly which slide it is, but I can scroll way to the top to find it. The candidate data form, there it is. The closing date is Wednesday, January 20th, 21st. When you get to that date, including your addendum page, scan the whole complete CDF and any addendum page into one document and submit it to Mitsy Hubbard at communityactionpartnership.com. As long as that email is posted as sent on Wednesday, January 20th, 2021, you've met the deadline. That is how it is sent. Okay? I'm going to scroll all the way back down to the bottom slide. I confess to you, this is where I like Zoom so much more than... Oh, no, keep my mouth shut. How to say, you're too late, it's already recorded. I wonder if you can edit that out, Jimmy. To see belong at the end of your name, that's our question. We want to see you on that picture. When we get to have our convention again in person, I think we're all hoping that will happen next year, if at all possible. But you can see Ccap, like community action in general, is creative and nimble. I think the partnership staff did an incredible job of having our virtual convention last year. If we have to do that again, I'm sure we will for our annual convention. But we really want to see you in that picture, getting your Ccap. I've never experienced anything quite like what it's like to watch everyone walk across the stage and feel the energy in that room. The job of Mitsy and me is to help you get there. Mitsy helping you henceforward with all the materials that are needed with your candidate data form, executive skills portfolio, And she and I will be working very much to help her this year and to be her backup. But then when it comes time when you qualify for the exam, I will be working with you, and Mitsy will be communicating with you for the process of the exam. We encourage you, though, to participate in those future webinars so that you can get more information on the Executive Skills Portfolio and its submission, and you can get more information about how the exam itself is structured and how it's unique. So it's been wonderful having this opportunity together with you. And actually, originally was scheduled to end at 2 o'clock, but I see it actually appears on the calendar to end by 2:30. So my apologies for going over the time I expected it to be. But I'm glad that we did have this little extra bit of time. I don't see any extra questions in the window, but I see that all attendees are still here, all the ones who showed up for it. So here's your last chance to throw any questions at us. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for taking time to listen to this person who keeps loving to stand on this soapbox. I think we got everything answered. So that's all I had to say. Thank you all. I look forward to more connection. Turning it back to you guys.
Thank you.